Hello everybody, I'm Ajit Mishra. I'm here again with a new session on speaking strategies. As you all know, I have been talking about various aspects of speaking in the previous sessions. So in this session, I'm going to talk about some very important things associated with speaking. Because while speaking, we take care of a few things and we ignore a few others. This is one such thing that gets ignored quite often while we speak. But if we take care of these things, we are going to make our speech far more effective, far more agreeable, and far more sensible. So sensibility is something that we need to incorporate into our speech so that we win greater acceptance all around. So in order to make our speech more sensitive, we need to take care of a few things, and language is one such thing that deserves our attention immediately. So there are certain language pitfalls when it comes to speech. Most often we are not aware of these pitfalls. And that's the reason why we generally fall. We are trapped in those pitfalls, and then we suddenly realize that we have done something absolutely wrong. We have messed up with something. So in order to avoid the pitfalls, it's very important that we take care of language that we use in our everyday speech, in our conversations, in our speech, so that we can take care of the language pitfalls. To start with, it is exclusionary language that we need to be cautious about. Most often we are not careful while using language, and that's one big reason why we end up using language that is neither acceptable, nor sensible, nor agreeable to the listeners. And they feel hurt, and the conversation or the trust that should have been built between the speaker and the listener is never built. So we need to take care of exclusionary language so that we do not practice it. So, exclusionary language in its most obvious form manifests as slurs, attacks, or verbal attacks, which are derogatory or insulting words that are applied to a group of people or an individual. So, though it may seem obvious, in order to foster meaningful communication or connection between people, it is important to ensure that the language we use is welcoming, inclusive, sensitive, and agreeable. So it's very important that we take care of these aspects of language. I can cite a few examples to help you understand what we mean by exclusionary language. For example, if I say businessman, it's very exclusionary because it favors one particular gender, the masculine gender. It doesn't talk about the other gender, the feminine gender. So instead of saying businessman, if I can say business person, it will be better. It will be far more inclusive. Another inclusive substitute for an exclusive expression is person with disability. Instead of using crippled or handicapped, we can always use a far more inclusive expression, that is person with disability. Similarly, for forefathers, we can use ancestors. For founding fathers, we can use founders. And for retarded, mentally retarded, we can use a person with developmental disability. So, this is just an example of how exclusionary language can be substituted by inclusive language. So I'm sure you'll take note of it and you'll find a list of such exclusionary expressions or statements, and you'll think of replacing them with more inclusive expressions. The second type of language pitfall is inappropriate use of language. So we all know, we just turn around, you'll find how often language is used inappropriately. Be it in the workplace, be it in the market, be it in the classroom, be it at the mall, almost everywhere language is used so inappropriately that it leads to the demeaning of our fellow human beings. So we generally use such demeaning language and dehumanizing language for our fellows whom we hate, whom we do not at all like. So it's a kind of profanity which is a socially offensive use of language. And this may also be called cursing, swearing, or expletives. So when we have to swear or curse, or we talk about inappropriate things, or make sexual comments, which is a big problem at workplaces. So for example, when we use short forms like WTF, bitch, slut, screw. So these are some of the expressions that are very, very inappropriate, but people do not mind using them. We need to check the use of such inappropriate language, because until and unless we do so, the trust building activity through communication will not be possible, because some people will always feel as if they are being excluded, as if they are being targeted, as if they are being verbally attacked, and the trust will always elude us. There's something that we all need to be very, very careful about. That is the I versus you scenario. In public speaking or in public speeches, most people generally fail to avoid this language pitfall. Most speakers generally end up using the I versus you scenario. They either say I have been doing this, I have done this, I know this, or you do not know this, you have not come across this, you probably are not aware of this. So this I versus you scenario is not good for a healthy speech scenario, because as we all know, speech always leads to some kind of trust building, a relationship building. So there has to be some trust between the speaker and the listeners. If that doesn't happen, no speech can ever be successful. So for any speech to be successful, trust is the only prerequisite. So whenever we use this I versus you scenario, we are not doing anything to establish that trust. Instead, we are creating a divide between the audience and ourselves. So the I becomes superior and the you becomes inferior, because the I is speaking and the you is listening. But that should not be the case. Instead of creating the I versus you scenario, it is a good idea to create a we scenario. There are certain effective speaking strategies that we require for workplace success, and we need to take care of them. We need to focus on those practices so that we develop skills for those practices, and we can actually use them to the maximum benefit. Presentations. So making presentation is a very difficult activity. It's a complex activity, although it's very, very interesting, provided you are there, creating a structure, rehearsing, doing a lot of things while making presentations. So your presentations will actually work in favor of your professional growth if it's done well. There are interviews, not only job interviews, there are various other kinds of interviews that happen either between employees, either between the top decision makers in an organization and the employees. It may happen between a client and an employee. So there are several types of interviews that happen regularly. So if we develop the right kind of speaking, we can succeed in interviews as well. Discussions. Most often people feel that discussions are debates. So they generally end up not having any discussion at all because they end up debating, and that leads to conflict. So discussions mean that we will speak in a manner so that we exchange our thoughts while accommodating each other's views. So effective speaking plays a very, very important role in discussions. So if I am good at discussions, that means I can expect workplace success. If I am good at presentations, I can expect workplace success. If I am good at interviews, I can also expect the same. Pitching an idea is again a very important, speaking strategy for workplace success. So if I have an idea, that's important. But what's more important is how well I can pitch my idea to someone. So for example, my prospective investors, my prospective employers, if I can pitch my idea in a manner that they are convinced, they are impressed, then they are going to offer me the benefits. Otherwise, it will not happen. So especially those people who are planning to come up with startups, they need to create a wonderful, very strong pitch so that they can pitch their innovative ideas in front of the investors, and they can impress, they can convince them of their ideas. So in order to pitch an idea, we have to be very clear about the idea itself, its scalability, its viability, and its replicability. So that is how we can structure our pitch, and then we can present it to the prospective investors. Storytelling is again one of the most important effective strategies adopted in the business world today. Because if you have storytelling abilities, you are bound to taste success, workplace success. It will help you not only understand the intensity of the things, but also present your ideas, your thoughts to your organization in a storied manner. I can give you an example of Martin Luther King Jr.'s famous "I Have a Dream" speech. So when you listen to that speech delivered by Martin Luther King Jr., you'll definitely understand that he was actually creating a wonderful story that everyone believed in, that everyone wanted to live. So that's the two important aspects of a story that people generally buy. So if you want to tell your story, you have to create a story that have these two aspects. There has to be credibility so that people can believe in your story, and there has to be this idea of hope so that people can look up to the future through your story. That's all for this session. I'm sure you have taken note of the things that I talked about, and I'm sure you're going to practice these things, you're going to explore them yet further, and you can strengthen your chances of tasting workplace success. So thank you for joining me. Bye-bye.